In a dingy bar, shots ring out.
She shoots once and misses, and then shoots again.
The suspect was seated at the bar having a cocktail. This was very unusual.
But what happened and why is a mystery.
I don't think I've had any court case like it.
Now it's up to investigators at the LA County Coroner to help determine whether the shooting was justified or homicide. On a quiet afternoon at a waterfront bar, 40 miles south of downtown Los Angeles, violence suddenly erupts.
Enough! Boss, you got a gun!
Near the jukebox, 37-year-old Pam Bagley lay dying. Seated at the bar was the woman who fired the shots, Imogene Jones.
She claimed self-defense immediately. She said she was being beaten up and she had to shoot Pam.
Pam died within hours. Her body was sent to North Mission Road. Dr. Eugene Carpenter would supervise the autopsy to determine whether this was a case of self-defense or murder.
I am never working for the prosecution. I'm never working for the defense. I am working for an accurate description of wounds.
The case would eventually be settled in an unusual courtroom showdown.
We had two coroners, Dr. Carpenter, who testified on the people's behalf. Then you had a world-renowned pathologist, Werner Spitz.
Dr. Spitz literally wrote a book on gunshot wound analysis. His expertise had been used often by prosecutors.
But this time he felt that he needed to testify for the defense, and he did so.
Resolving this controversial and complex case hinged on one thing.
Forensics was the key to solving the mystery of how did Pamela Bagley die? How was she shot?
The events leading up to the forensic fireworks began innocently enough on New Year's Day 1994 in a low-rent district near the docks of Long Beach. Around 11 a.m., Pam Bagley and a friend arrived at the Neptune Club.
It was very much like a rundown Cheers. These are people that knew each other very well for a lot of years. It was a small bar that had a pool table toward the back.
Later that afternoon, Imogene Jeannie Jones showed up.
It appears that Imogene was in a foul mood that day. Earlier in the day, she had said to one of the witnesses, "Nobody better F with me today."
They called her pistol packing mama. She always carried at least one gun on her. In fact, the night that the murder happened, she had two guns on her. The .22 Magnum revolver, and she also had a .380 semi-auto pistol in her purse that was cocked and ready to go.
Imogene Jones was frail with a history of health problems. Several years earlier, she had been robbed and claimed to carry the guns for protection. Pam Bagley knew to keep her distance.
I mean, if she's carrying a gun, there's a reason. And she said, well, yeah, I don't care for her. I don't like her. She's just a very surly type person.
Pam's friend, Arlene, was aware of Jeannie's reputation too. Even so, she harassed Jeannie about her appearance.
Get out of here, you damn loser.
Over the next couple of hours, the two women continued to snipe at one another. By early evening, the verbal jabs turned physical.
Your girlfriend get lost.
A lot of people had been drinking. Pistol Packin' Mama was angry at Arlene, and they got into a hair tussling when Imogene yelled out, "Why don't you get your girlfriend and get out of here?"
Pam Bagley then intervened in the fight. Got involved in a verbal dispute with Imogene Jones.
What happened during the next 30 seconds became a matter of major contention. The only certainty was that the argument turned violent.
Oh, she got a gun!
Imogene Jones pulled out a gun, a .22 caliber pistol with magnum rounds in it, and shot 2 times.
One bullet hit Pam in the chest. She collapsed nearby, fighting for her life. Imogene surrendered her gun and sat back down at the bar.
My partner and I were at Harbor Station and received a radio call of an assault with a deadly weapon. We observed paramedics already at the location administering first aid to a victim of a gunshot wound that was lying on the floor of the bar. The majority of these calls that we roll on involving shootings or assault with a deadly weapon, the suspect's usually gone. We call it GOA, gone on arrival.
But this call was very different.
In this case, the suspect was seated at the bar having a cocktail when we entered the bar.
Jeannie told the officers she had been attacked, that she feared for her life.
She seemed rather angry and didn't seem to think that she had done anything wrong.
All right, hang in there.
She felt justified in what she had done.
But was she? Did Imogene Jones act in self-defense? Eyewitness accounts were contradictory.
How many drinks did you have?
It was amazing. It was something I'd never come up against before.
It was up to the experts at North Mission Road to sort out those disputed 30 seconds. Their findings would tip the scale towards murder or self-defense. A heated argument ends tragically with the death of 37-year-old Pam Bagley. Imogene Jones admits firing the fatal shot, but has her own version of events.
Imogene's story was that she was sitting on a stool, and Arlene came and pulled her off the stool and started fighting with her and pulled her to the ground. And then Pam came over, the victim, and separated them, and she sat on straddling Pistol Packin' Mama and started banging her head to the ground. So in self-defense, Pistol Packin' Mama pulled out the gun from her hip and shot Pam at close range.
And that's how it all went down. At least that's what the Pistol Packin' Mama told police.
She appeared more angry than anything, and the fact that she was seated back at the bar having a drink led me to believe that she wasn't too concerned about what had transpired.
Detective John Zambos drove to the bar to interview the 10 eyewitnesses to the shooting.
Listening to their statements and hearing what they had to say, it appeared that not all people see the same thing at the same time.
But several eyewitness accounts were the same. From them, investigators pieced together an entirely different version of events.
Pam had come over and broken up a hair tussling fight and started walking away.
Get enough already.
The argument went from the bar over to some booths.
Take your girlfriend and go. Oh, come on.
Imogene reached for her gun that was on her hip, and she fired 2 shots. Pam was just turning to sit at a booth and was bending down, and one of the shots entered Pam and killed her.
Did Imogene Jones fire her pistol for no good reason? Or was it an act of self-defense, as she claimed? It would be up to medical examiner Dr. Eugene Carpenter and his forensic team to solve this mystery.
At the time of the autopsy, I had only the most general information as to what happened, and that's really all I needed. I did not know any of the details, nor did I know any of the issues that might come up in court.
But Dr. Carpenter did know one thing: dead bodies don't lie. Would this one confirm Jeannie Jones' claim of self-defense?
Get out of here.
A wild barroom shooting leaves one woman dead and another in custody. Sorting out exactly what happened was now underway in the autopsy room of North Mission Road. Medical examiner Eugene Carpenter first had to determine how far the gun was from the victim, Pam Bagley, when it was fired. The distance would tell investigators whether Imogene shot Pam in self-defense.
I looked for evidence that the tip of the barrel of the gun may have been at contact range of fire or loose contact range of fire within 1 to 2 inches.
1 to 2 inches. The very same distance Imogene Jones claimed she fired the gun. There was one way to tell. Shots fired this close leave telltale signs.
Within 6 inches, most handguns deposit soot on the clothing, which is nothing more than gun smoke or fully burnt gunpowder.
Pam Bagley's clothes would almost certainly determine range of fire. But there was a problem. In the frantic effort to save her life, Pam's clothes had accidentally been thrown away.
Not having the clothing caused problems in this case.
Big problems, in fact. Now Dr. Carpenter needed a different way to determine how close Imogene was to Pam when the gun was fired. So he looked on the victim's skin for stippling or gunpowder burns. Within a few inches, stippling marks number in the hundreds. That's not what Dr. Carpenter found.
The stippling consisted of about 10 to 20 pinhead-sized areas of damage to the skin surrounding the bullet hole.
This suggested that the gun was not fired in self-defense at point-blank range, as Imogene claimed, but probably from farther away. To make sure, Dr. Carpenter then conducted a second series of tests to find out the trajectory of the bullet as it traveled through Pam's body.
The bullet basically hit about here on the body. It went downward, to the right, and backward.
A downward path meant Imogene was standing above Pam when the fatal shot was fired. But that's not how Imogene said it happened.
When you hear Imogene Jones, her story was not consistent with the wound itself. It went front to back, top to bottom.
Neither the stippling nor the bullet track supported Imogene's story of self-defense. Instead, they pointed to murder. And that's exactly what prosecutors plan to say in The People versus Imogene Jones.
What I was bringing to trial as the prosecutor was a simple, true story. What actually happened and the forensic evidence to corroborate what actually happened and what made sense.
But it wouldn't be that simple.
Imogene hired the foremost expert in the country, maybe the world, on gunshot residue.
Dr. Werner Spitz had testified in countless high-profile cases, and his book was revered by pathologists across the country.
It is one of the main reference texts of forensic pathology.
His spin on the evidence was expected to differ sharply from the findings of North Mission Road, making an already complex case even more confusing.
When you have a confused jury, you get a hung jury, you get a not guilty, because they have to believe what I'm trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
Dr. Spitz first challenged the stippling evidence and what it said about the fatal wounds.
And his testimony was he reviewed the wound, and he said, based on his review of the wound, the gun was close to contact.
Dr. Spitz said the lack of stippling could be explained by the 2 T-shirts Pam was wearing when she was shot. They blocked a majority of the burning gunpowder. And since the clothes were discarded, this cast even more doubt on the prosecution's case.
The clothing would have made the case so simple, because we would have seen how far away the gun was.
Then Dr. Spitz began battering the bullet trajectory theory. He made a compelling case that the slug traveled downward because Pam was leaning over Imogene when the gun was fired. The DA needed more evidence, and fast, or Imogene Jones could go free.
I made a motion to do some testing that wasn't done prior, and to recall Dr. Carpenter.
Would the new forensics test make sense of what really happened? Or was the prosecution hopelessly outgunned? With famed pathologist Werner Spitz punching holes in their murder case, prosecutors asked for more forensic tests.
Our gun expert did a ballistics test to show the jury how significant scorching would be from up close versus from further away.
Firearms expert Anthony Paul conducted a series of tests to see how much stippling would appear when a bullet was fired through a cloth sample, similar to the 2 layers that the victim wore.
We conducted test patterns, shooting at material at different distances, and then comparing that to the actual evidence that we had.
The goal was to find a stippling pattern that matched what was found on Pam Bagley's body.
Anthony Paul took the gun that was used in the murder. He took same ammunition, and he took material that was very consistent with what Pam was wearing that night.
First, Paul shot the .22 revolver in tight contact, directly against the sample T-shirt. The effect was dramatic. The cloth showed severe burning. Pam's body had no burn marks.
It was not a contact or a hard contact wound.
Paul then fired from distances of 3 inches and then 6 inches. That one matched the pattern on Pam Bagley's body.
We found that the actual distance was up to 6 or 8 inches away.
Out of here! Get out!
And that meant the shot wasn't fired at point-blank range in self-defense. But to prove imaging, also known as the pistol packin' mama, was indeed a killer, the prosecution would need one more piece of compelling evidence. They turned to North Mission Road.
The most important injury, in fact, from the bullet's path was to the spinal cord, and it went into the spinal canal and hit the spinal cord. It severed the last 1/2 inch or so.
The nerves controlling mobility in the legs would have been severely damaged. Pam Bagley instantly paralyzed, unable to walk.
Do something, man.
Jeannie Jones' defense argued that after being shot, Pam stood up, walked a few steps, and then collapsed. This scenario was impossible.
Pamela could not have walked even 1 step, much less 3 or 4 steps, to get the distance where she fell because of the severed spinal column.
It was now up to the jury.
Dr. Carpenter went up against a pathologist who'd written numerous books, and the jury believed Dr. Carpenter over Werner Spitz.
The jury convicted Imogene of second-degree murder.
Imogene Jones was sentenced to 15 years to life. In 2004, she died in prison at age 72 after serving 10 years of her sentence. The case of the pistol packin' mama. One more file from the archives of the Los Angeles County Coroner.